Of Hashem, we are learning Shekalim Daf Chaf. We left off on Daf Yutes Amud Beis. We were speaking about how do you determine the status of meat when you find it out there, whether sometimes the question is whether it's kachim, whether it's chulin, even if it's chulin, whether it's kosher, whether it's not kosher. And we were speaking about the gewaldige halacha of we follow roiv and meat that is found in a location where the majority of the suppliers of meat today are supplying kosher meat. You mamish assume that the meat is kosher. Now, as we mentioned in the last year, there is one other detail that in the Mishnah is not being discussed. And that's a detail that came about after the times of the Tanoim. And we're speaking specifically about Rav. And not only when Rav lived in the Holy Land, but Dafka after Rav moved to Bavel. Because of the fact that the communities in Bavel were a little bit lax in certain areas of halacha, so everything is about balancing it out. So Rav in Bavel introduced this concept that if meat is left unsupervised, there is a possibility that it came from an animal that brought it from another location where over there, roiv of the meat is not kosher. So when you find meat over here, you can't say, well, who supplies the meat over here? Who says it came from over here? And that's called basar shenasalam min ha'ayin. In the Gemara in Chulin of Tzadikei, we learned that Levi, which lived at the same time, did not accept that chumrah. We in Shulchan Aruch, by the way, we follow the Shita of Rav. We do have a concept of basar shenasalam min ha'ayin, which brings about many practical halachic challenges of how can you just leave meat in your refrigerator and go away from your house, leaving it unsupervised. Maybe the cleaning lady, if you have a cleaning lady, maybe she bought for herself meat and she exchanged her meat with your meat. That's a problem that has to be dealt with. Another detail to say that meat that's left unsupervised, according to Rav, is basar shenasalam min ha'ayin. But we learned in the last sugya, in Daf Yutes Amud Beis, as we have clearly, the Gemara in Daf Tzadikei, Chulin Tzadikei Amud Aleph speaks about it, that if you find meat in the hands of a goy, not where there's a possibility where the goy had his own animal and he cut it off his animal, that's not called basar shenasalam min ha'ayin. Basar shenasalam min ha'ayin is meat that was left unsupervised. So we're going to have amazing stories of Rav, most of which he was machmir, not allowing people to eat the meat because of the issue of basar shenasalam min ha'ayin. Now there's another detail that we b'chlal did not speak about on Daf Yutes, and that's a very important topic. We were only focusing, the whole Daf Yutes is when you find money or you find meat, we were speaking about its Isser veheter status. Is it kachim? Is it chulin? Is it kosher? Is it treif? But don't forget, my friends, that there's another part of Yiddishkeit, and that is the nemaminus. If I find something, I may not always keep it. Some things I have to announce. If it has an owner, I don't own it. So we're going to have another few stories on Daf Chav before we finish this whole sugya that's going to introduce, hold on, when you find something, even if it's kosher, but it might not be yours. So we have to chazar over various halachas that there are times that if you find a lost article in a location where so many people go there, that the loser, the one who lost it, will have yush. He'll give up hope by him ever recovering it. That feeling of yush, of despair in itself, makes that item become disowned by the owner. That's the sugya in Eila Metzias, that's the sugya in Bava Metzia. So we're going to add that component to all of these stories of people finding meat. We're going to move on with the next Mishnah, and we're going to actually learn that there were 7 takanas that were made in the Beis HaMikdash regarding certain karbanos parts that need add-ons, and whenever there is a challenge as to who will out of pocket, let's say the nesachim that comes with certain karbanos, that it should come from the communal fund in the Beis HaMikdash, and we're going to go over all of the 7 cases. And on Daf Chaf Amud Beis, we're going to be learning a lot about the daily karban mincha that is brought by the Kohen Gadol, known as Chavite Kohen Gadol. Actually, when a Kohen finally merited to begin doing his service in the Beis HaMikdash, he would bring what we call a minchas chinuch, meaning that since today is his first day of his life doing the avodah, he would bring a karban that's very similar to the Chavite Kohen Gadol. He would bring a flour offering. Eloma, the Kohen, average Kohen, brought it the first time that he does the avodah, minchas chinuch. The Kohen Gadol brought that type of minchas chinuch every day of his life. And not only that, if the Kohen Gadol, when the Kohen Gadol passes away, until they appoint a new Kohen Gadol. Let's begin. These are one of the 7 enactments. Then theoretically, money from the estate of the deceased Kohen Gadol has to supply the daily Chavite Kohen Gadol until they appoint another Kohen Gadol, with many more pratim that we'll learn in today's daf. What happens if they appoint a new Kohen Gadol on the same day that he passes away? He already brought his half in the morning. What happens with the other half? The new Kohen Gadol is only going to bring it in the afternoon. Does he have to bring an entire mincha? Does he only bring half? What do you do with the unused half? And many, many other pratim. Chavra, let us start on Daf Yutes Amud Beis. We are in the second to last line in the Amud. Says the Gemara that Rav Nachas L'Taman, when Rav descended to Bavel, because of the fact that Chamsun, that means he saw that they are Mekilin, that the communities in Bavel had certain leniencies, and many times you enact a rabbinic chumrah, not because in this specific case we are worried about something. When you see people are taking halachis very leniently, then you have to fix the breaches. So Rav brought about the following chumrah, v'chamar aleihay. And the chumrah that we're speaking about here is the concept of basar shenasalam min ha'ayin. If meat was left unsupervised, then we have to suspect something that's far-fetched, relatively far-fetched, but we suspect that there might be a problem here. And let's begin with a couple of stories. Number 1, Chad Barnash, there was a person that Azal he went afchaf and ba'ai mashizga, that he wanted to wash his meat askufte begoy nahara, on the bank of a river. So there was a guy that had meat, and he went to wash his meat, and whether he washed his meats and he left, or what, something happened that he left that location, leaving one of his pieces of meat over there unsupervised on the riverbank. The inshasa, he forgot it there, and now va'azerlei, and he forgot and he left. Then he remembered, Oy Gevalt, I left a piece of meat on the riverbank, and Bo'ai, Chazar, Bo'ai, Misbina, he came to retrieve it, he came to take it back, and he wanted to know whether there was an issue. And in that location, what did we learn, Chavra, in the Mishnah? That if you find, it's not worse than you finding meat, right? You found meat, so if you ask Rav, what's the status of the meat? So based on what we learned, he would ask you regarding that general location. The meat suppliers there, Rubam are kosher, Rubam are nevela. Teisha chanuyos, that will be the din. You found the meat out there, called the parish meruba parish. But Rav added something else. Amalei, Rav tells him, even though Rav knew that the majority of the meat suppliers are supplying kosher meat, that asur lach. Why? Why is it asur? Because because I say that hahi shatav nahara, the meat that you left was taka washed away on the river. And the same river that washed away your kosher meat, the river upstream, in that village upstream, they sell roiv nevela. Va'aisa choyrei de nevela tachtoi. Gevaldik. So you no longer look at right here, it was left unsupervised. Could be it came from another place. And there's such a possibility. Now, is that a majority possibility? No. But that was the chumrah of Rav. That you don't only look right here. The moment you take other neighborhoods into account, it changes the roiv. Now, Ruba da Alma has nevela. So therefore you have to say that it's nevela. Another story. Chad Banash, there was a person that had a malach b'shuka, that he was going in the market. And te'in kupat, he was carrying meat. And Azal Daisa, vulture came. And it snatched the meat. You saw the vulture snatching the meat. A couple of moments later, a piece of meat came down from the heavens. Utelakte, and he threw down another in its place. And circumstantial, it made sense that the one that he took was the one that he dropped. Chazar ba'ai min siba, so he wanted to take it, and again he had the seichel of asking the Rav. He went to Rav, Amalei Rav, again asur lach. No, you can't have it. Why? Because because I will say that basar de nevela havestina, this vulture was originally already carrying meat. I know he dropped a piece of meat. He already snatched meat in another location. Utelakte, and he threw it down. In other words, your meat that he took, he kept. The meat that he dropped was meat that the vulture got in another location. The nasba u'achrana. That's mamish the whole concept of basar shenasala min ha'ayin. You follow Roiv? Yeah. The moment you say that the source of meat is not only here in this location, in the general larger location, Roiv meat is Nevela. Only here was it the majority of meat suppliers are supplying kosher meat. Another story.
When does Roiv ever help you? I mean, if the meat is sitting there, then obviously it wasn't, you could always say that this was what happened, that it was switched out.
That was Rav's big chumrah. Yeah, exactly. Once meat is left unsupervised, when does Roiv help you? So even if you find it in the hands of a goy, if you know that he bought it in a store, you just don't know which store. Here, if it was not left unsupervised, then you follow the local Roiv. Roiv helps you when it was not left unsupervised.
But if it's in the hand of the guy, then you wouldn't say he went into the store. Then you would go by the Roiv of the store. So you would never do the merca. You
would not do merca. That doesn't bother me. You would only do the merca if you yourself got confused. Okay. Says the next story, Gnai Shatav Zikin, that Zikin are wine jugs. So the Gnai River washed away these wine skins, these jugs of wine. And again, the Gemara doesn't say, obviously they washed up a little bit down the riverbed. So they disappeared for a while, same thing with meat, same thing with wine, and something similar washed up. So also, Uvda Kumei, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Rabbi Lazar, and Va'amar, and he says like this, that Yechakmun Shapoya Kitrohain, let the wine pourers examine their knots. In other words, if there is a siman that they can say, these were the wineskins that we poured wine into, you can rely on that. By the way, the same thing is with meat. If you remember in Chulin that they would cut the meat in a triangular, they would cut the meat in a certain way. They would make a mark that would be their siman, that this did not come from another location because other locations don't cut the meat or they don't tie the knots on the wineskins this way. And that is enough. But if you don't have that siman, so here you have Rabbi Yitzchak ben Rabbi Lazar subscribe to the concept of Rav of Nesalim and Ha'ayin, then you have to look at the much larger area and it changes the Roiv. Another story, that Nekunika Ishtekach, that a container of wine was found. Where? In the Kanishta, in the shul, in the city of Buli. Also of the Kamei de Rabbi Yirmiyah. So here he said like this, that Amad Yishakmun so koiraya, these Nikonikas, they had certain red dye, a certain red dye that was painted on these containers. So he says that let the ones who paint the red dye, let them come and check Avida Taihoin. Let them check their own work. If they can say, we painted this container, Yidden, then you don't have to worry that it's Yain Stam. If they can't tell you for sure that this is theirs, even though it was lost and found in Buli, so what? Even if in Buli most people are Yidden, so what? Maybe someone brought it from out there. Right. A roasted kid, again meat, was found where be Isratia in the streets, the Gufta. And v'hitiru mishum shnei devarim. And here, when they asked the Shaila, they gave a heter. And here we're not only addressing the concept of meat that's left unsupervised, but here finally we are introducing dinim ominous. So there are two reasons why they allowed the finer to consume that roasted tzali, that roasted gedi. Number one, mishum etziyah. And number two, mishum roiv mahalchei derachim. As we'll explain, mishum etziyah. In other words, how can you keep something? Maybe you have to announce it, and this definitely had a siman. But the Tani, we learned in a Braisa that even if what you lost is something that has a sign, nevertheless, if you lost it in a place where it's not only avud from you, but it's avud from everyone, it's a very busy location, or if you find it something in the hands of a lion, which means the owner, even though he has a siman, but when a lion snatches something from you, he has you, she despairs of ever getting it back. Or miyad hagayas, if soldiers go through a village and they just pillage as they do. Even if what they take is something that if a normal person would have found it, he would have announced it and you would have had a siman. But when you saw the guy is taking it, you abandoned hope of getting it back. Or mishunas hayam, from a surge of the sea. Or mishunas hana'ar, it's avud nikol adam, guys. We're going to learn this in Bava Metzia. Or if you find something on a nesratya gedoil in a very large highway, or umiplatya gedoil in a very large plaza. So the rule is harei elu shaloi. Whoever finds it gets to keep it because of the rule of yush. And therefore, this they found it right. Where did he find it? Be'isratya de gufta. They found it on a large highway in the city of Gufta, so that, first of all, as far as the Nimamanis is concerned, you get to keep it. What about the status of kashrus? Umishum roiv mahal chiderachim mishum shchitas nachri. So here, he does not subscribe to basar shenasalam min ha'ayin. So we're not worried that an animal brought it from who knows where. See, once you take an animal into equation, or a vulture, then where do you put the parameter? It's much larger. No, here you look at the meat that's found over here. So you have to look who sells meat in this location. And Enochanami found it on a highway. Okay, what are the majority of people that travel on the highway? Amazing. If the roiv of the people that travel on this highway are people that eat kosher, then you follow that roiv also. And you say, roiv, it came from kosher meat. Beautiful. Another story, that the ishtakach, oh no, finished. And now the Gemara says, after they paskind, and obviously, again, if you would take into account basar shenasalam and ha'ayin, then you would not be able to give the setter. But as we mentioned before, the whole basar shenasalam and ha'ayin, even from Rav, was something that the Rav subscribed to only after he went to Babel. This happened in Israel. No one had this. Maybe it came from 10 miles away, brought by a vulture. No one had that chashash. And they somehow discovered that it came from the house of Rebbe, which was a good thing. They taka discovered later that the meat was kosher. Now again, there's no issue of dinim amanis because of the din of yush. And another similar story, that there was an eagle de guvna, there was a round cheese that was found bepundika de Levi. It was found in Levi's lodgings. Now Levi did live in Bavel, but the Baal Plukta, the one who argues with Rav regarding this whole basar shenasalam and ayin, my friends, look in Chulin, is Levi. Levi never subscribed to that. So in his property they found cheese. And they asked the Shaila, can the finder keep it? So here again, v'hitirum, there's an issue with who does it belong to, mitzadini mamanis, nor is there an issue with Gevinas Akum, as we learned in Avodah Zarah, that Gevinas Akum, like Yayin Akum, is problematic. We don't have to worry about it. Both because of the laws of Metzia, and also Mishum Roiv Mahal Chiderachim. And here we speak it out again. Mishum Metzia, the Tani we learned in Abraisa, Hamatzal Miyata Gayos. Here the order is in the reverse for some reason. Umayat Huari, or Mishuna Sayam, or Mishuna Sanar, or if you find something in a large highway, Misrati Gedoila, or Umiplati Gedoila, the rule is Harei Elu Shaloi because of the din of Yush. Let's go to the din of Kashru. What about din of Kashrus? So again, you found it in a lodging, which is important. Lodging means you can't just say, who lives in this neighborhood? No. Who goes to the lodgings? People that come from other areas. Fine. So you look at the other areas. But if the majority of the people that come to this hotel are people that keep kosher, I don't care where they came from. Roiv are from kosher. And you found it in the lodging. You found it when it was parush. Called a parush, miruba parush. And you don't suspect of Gevinas Nachri. Now, again, if you would be chayish to basar shenasalam min ha'ayin, then it would not be enough to say that the roiv mahal chiderachim keep kosher, because maybe it came from some other place. But Levi Bechlal did not subscribe to this, and indeed they found out later that it belonged min Rabbi Loza ben Rabbi Yosi, not dinim amanis. It was yush, but they found out taka that it was not gevinas nachrim. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Mana, Kumi Rabbi Yosi, I don't understand. You are telling me that if something is found in a location where it's so busy that the owners despair and the finder gets to keep it, but I see that when a big tzaddik finds an article even in such a location, he does announce that he found something, waiting for its owner to come and give a siman. Hold on, so why are you telling me that there's no issue? I see that they behave, that they look for its owner. Amalei, to which Rav Mana tells, Rabbi Yosi tells Rav Mana that at ein havisa mashkach loy nosbas, right? Would you not take it if you were to find it? You would know it. You are allowed to keep it. Adarabba, your father, Rabbi Yoina, lo yamar kain. Elo Amar Halavai, Fakert, he said that Halavai, when he finds a lost article, Kad Nashkach, Nashkach min Piyusa Ulagoy, I should find it from a place of the intersection where it is already in the status of a Srat Yegedoy. I hope that if I find something, I find it in a place on the highway where we apply the rule that there is Yush. Because it's Avod Mikol Adam. So don't confuse the behavior of the Chachamim that they still make such an announcement. It's not because Me'ikir Adin you don't get to keep it, because there is a siman. The rule is correct. If an article that has a identifying mark, but if it was found in a location that is very busy, we say the owner had yush, and you get to keep it. Afilu Cain, nevertheless, that Ashkach v'leinosif, your father paskined that you get to keep it, but when he found such a thing, he didn't keep it because he behaved lifnei meshuras adin. So don't prove from the fact that Chachamim, when they find an article, no matter where they look, they say, I found a lost article, hoping that they'll get a siman. It doesn't mean that that me'ikir adin, they don't get to keep it. No, Yush affects that the owner loses his ownership over this article. The finder gets to keep it. Elama, if you want to go beyond the letter of the law, then yeah, fine, the Chachamim do that, and they announce, hoping that their owner will come with a siman. Okay, further, says the next Mishnah, that Behema shenem tzeis miYerushalayim va'ad Migdal Eder. Migdal Eder is a location near Beis Lechem. If you find an animal within Yerushalayim and Migdal Eder, or take that same distance of Migdal Edel to Yerushalayim and circle Yerushalayim from all directions with that same distance. So here we're following the din of Roiv. So we say that if you found a Zecharim, a male animal, oilos. Now hold on, we got a problem here because a Shlamim can be a male or a female. A oila can only be male. The Mishnah is saying Zecharim are oilos, and if you find a nekeva, then we say it's zivchei shlamim, and that's something that we will have to further clarify in the Gemara. It's not the way it sounds, but we'll leave that for the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, I want to add something else. That if haroil psachim, if you find an animal which is either a goat or a sheep, and it's male, right? B'nei shana, within the first year. So then we say that it's a psachim. Koidim l'regel lamed yoim. Gewaldik. Now, I just want to remind everyone that towards the end of Pesachim, in the 9th chapter, we had another din. There we had a machlekes tanoim, whether you need to have at least one of the original members of the group part of the chevra eating the Pesach. And according to that Tana, you can't use it. Well, you have to remember that. But as far as we want to determine what type of animal it came from, so we are continuing with the concept of here, roiv, and roiv animals of that age and that type within 30 days of Pesach were animals that were designated for a Pesach. Bar Shaina continues the Mishnah. Now we have an animal, right, that was found, and it's now being brought, right, the way we're learning Pshat, it's being brought la'oila, being brought l'shlamim, being brought l'Pesach. What happens if the animal that you found has to come with nisachim, with the flour, oil, and the wine, as many animals have to come with the nesachim. So since the finder will get to bring the animal for him, he's going to bring it as an oila, as a shlamim, but for him, so you tell the finder, fine, that out of pocket, you have to bring your own nesachim. And that is the ikin hadin. However, but then when people heard that if you find an animal, it doesn't bother you that you don't get to keep it for your own pocket, fine. If you find an animal within this parameter of Yerushalayim, you have to presume that it's a carbon, fine, and you bring it. But if you have to out of pocket the nesachim, people may believe they didn't find it. They ran away from it. So because of that, this is one of the 7 enactments that is kino based in, that if the animal is a lost animal that you are bringing because you found it, then the nesachim will come from communal funds, and this will at least guarantee that people won't abandon these lost animals, and they will be brought on the mizbeach. And indeed, Amar Rab Shimon, Zayin Devarim Hiskinu based in, that there were 7 such enactments, all regarding how add-ons should come from the temple's treasury in order to prevent a michshol from happening, and this is one of them. So we're going to use this as din number 1. If you find a lost animal, Bein Migdal Edel and Yerushalayim, aside of knowing to determine what type of animal it is, what type of carbon it is, the nesachim, if it has nesachim, will come from the tzibur. Din number 2, a guy can send karbanis. And if the guy lives very far, so if the shalach imay nesachim, if he sends nesachim, obviously does not mean the items themselves, because of we just mentioned the concept of yayin stam, but it means if he sent along also the money needed to purchase the nesachim, as we also learned that it was sold in the Beis HaMikdash. You had the tickets, Yochanan ben Pinchas, and you had the achiyah. But if he sent the money is gavaldik, then kedevim mishaloi. But what happens v'im lav? The guy didn't know that you have to add nesachim. If the guy would live nearby, you would go to him nearby. You would tell him, Reb Guy, you got to give extra money for the nesachim. But he lives in Medinas Hayam. It's going to take too much time to get to him. It's too difficult to get to him. So then kedevim mishal tzibur. So they determined not to bring the carbon. No, you bring the carbon on behalf of the guy, and the money for the nesachim shall come mishal tzibur. Then number 3, v'chein ger, and we're speaking about a ger who, after he converted, did not have any children, which means that halachically he has no heirs. So ger shemes, and he has zivachim. So if a person passes away and he has korbanos, those who are brought, what about the nesachim? It comes from the estate, but no one is yarshin, so everything is hefker. So im yesh lo nesachim, still, if the estate has funds for the nesachim, then kerevim nishaloi. But ve'im lav, if all he left was the animal, which was designated as a zevach, then kerevim mishal tzibur, it comes from communal funds. Then number 4, v'tanai bezdenu al kohen gadol shemeis, and this is already going to go into a big part of today's daf. If a kohen gadol passes away, and they did not yet appoint a new kohen gadol, as we will see, that there are different opinions. Originally, the chavite kohen gadol has to be brought every day is no debate. God is going to get that flour offering every single day. The question is, who will pay for it? So our Mishnah says that part of the 7 enactments is sheteheimen chasei kerevai mishal tzibur. Now the question is, and not from what? Not from not, we'll see as a machloikas tanoim. Either originally it came from the family had to pay for it, or it always came mishal tzibur, but they needed to make a special fundraising just for this, a collection just for this. And they enacted that don't make a special fundraiser just for this, people won't give money to this. It should come from the already communal funds. Now Rabbi Yehuda says that no, he disagrees with this enactment. It doesn't come mishal tzibur, but mishal yarshim. It comes from the heirs of the yarshim. And another detail, and this detail is l'kol ha'alma, that when you continue to bring the chavite kohen gadol, when there isn't yet a new appointed kohen gadol, the amount of the flour offering, the type of flour offering is the same, but when the kohen gadol is alive, it's divided into 2 halves. Half is brought in the morning, half is brought in the afternoon. When there is no living kohen, so then the din is ushleima ha'isa kereva. It was not half, it was brought all together. All of it is burnt on the mizbeach. The 5th takana is al hamelach v'alo eitzim, that all of the salt and the wood that was donated to be used in the offering of karbanos. What happens when kohanim are going to be preparing the kachim that they eat, like the meat of a chatos, like the meat of an asham, that they are allowed to use the salt and the wood to eat kachim. Shiur kohanim ne'oisin bohem. Wow, and not me'ilah. Why is that? Because lechatchila, that's called the Tanai Bezdin, when people donated the money and the Beis HaMikdash bought salt and wood, milechatchila, it was already designated that the part that's going to be used for the Kahanim's consumption of kachim, that is never considered hegdish, and there is no din of me'ilah. So it's only a financial issue, and that was the takana that they can use the funds of the Beis HaMikdash. Din number 6, va'al hapara, regarding the para paraduma, shaloi yiyu ma'alam be'efra, that there's no me'il on the ashes. Guys, it's getting late. We'll leave this tomorrow when we learn the Gemara. And the 7th, va'alakinim absulois, we had this quoted last daf, that if you had this collection box of kinim, and let's go l'chachamim, that it was for people that are obligated to bring pair of birds, and something happened to the money or to the birds, So we have to replace it because the owners knew when they put the money in the box that night they're good. They got their kapara. So it has to be replenished. Shiur bo'os mishal tzibur. That the community, there was a communal fund. It came from the Mo'is Tzibur. Now, it had to be bequeathed, so someone needed to make a kinyan. Zachan la'adam shalei b'fanav. So there was someone that picked up that money, and he says, I am acquiring it on behalf of the owner, wherever the owner is, whoever the owner is. But the money came from Tzibur. However, we learned this above. Rabbi Yossi says no, that there was something else, that the people that did the business with the Beis HaMikdash, the suppliers, Hamasapik Esakinim, part of the deal was, aside of the fact that they charged the minimum amount of price, another din is that they were told that if there's going to be a need to replace some monies or birds that became invalidated or lost, that they have to pocket it. They bear that financial merit. That humesapik es hapsulois. All right, starting with the Gemara. Says the Gemara that Rab Oishia Rabba Omar, that when it says in the Mishnah, if you find Zecharim Oilois, right, it means b'demehem shanu, and this is so important. What is it more? Lavoi b'demehem shanu. So Chavra, look inside the Tiklin Chadatin, 13 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Lavoi b'demehem shanu explains the Tiklin Chadatin. That what the Gemara is telling you is that don't read the Mishnah like Chumash without Rashi. The Mishnah doesn't mean that you bring it as an oilo. Hein ba'atzman einon kerevin klal. You cannot bring this animal. Elo, the mighty, what could you do? That im ba adam lezeh mitzoi takana lebehemois elo. If you find an animal like we spoke out, my question is that a shlamim can also be a zachar. So now I know that an oila can only be a zachar, but how can you say that the oilos? Maybe, how do you know? Maybe it's not. Maybe this animal is a shlamim. You don't know what this animal is. So he says the whole Mishnah is to be understood differently. The finder of the animal itself will not be brought. But what are you going to do with it? So if someone wants to make a takana for this animal, he won't benefit. But he doesn't want for God to lose out, because since roiv of these animals were a carbon, we don't want God to lose the carbon. You don't know what it is. You don't know what animal type, what carbon it is. But you want to redeem the animal, and you're going to be magdish its equivalent value. So the din is, if the animal that you find was a male, you know what you have to do? The fellow that found the animal will have to put not one pile of money, 2 piles of money. Maybe it's a shlamim, maybe it's an oila. So let's say the animal is worth $100. This finder is going to take out of his own pocket $200. And he's going to say, if this animal that I found was a oila, may the kedusha be redeemed on the $100 bill on the right. And then that $100 bill will be used to buy an oila. If this animal was a shlam, it may be redeemed on the $100 bill to the left. And then that $100 bill you'll use to buy a shlamim. This yid is going to bring 2 karbanos. One of them will be his own donation oila or his own donation shlamim, and the other one will be the replacement of the animal that was lost. That's the way you have to learn the Mishnah. Says Rabbi Oishaya Rabbah. Now, by the way, there's a big issue over here, because Rabbi Oishaya Rabbah never mentioned the need of waiting for the animal to get blemished. And as we have a klal that if an animal is imbued with kedushas mizbeach, kedushas haguf, you can't stam redeem it. However, there is the shita of Rebbe Meir that says that bidi eved, if you redeem such an animal, then the redemption has an effect. So Rabbi Shaya Rabbah, all of this is very brief in Yerushalmi. Istaka is saying you don't have to wait for it to get blemished. You go ahead and you redeem it. You have to redeem it as a suffix on 2 animals. So if it's a male, it's also for an oila. If it's a female, you only redeem it for a shlamim. If the animal you don't bring, you redeem it without, even before it gets blemished. So on that detail, Amar lei Rabbi Yechon to Rabbi Shaya Rabbah, that oimner loyla adam seyum oil bekachim. Seyum oil bekachim here means lachatchila. Even Rabbi Meir only says that if you redeemed an animal without a blemish, then the redemption is effective. But lachatchila, you never do that. Ella, indeed, says Rabbi Yochanan, the pshat in the Mishnah is the animal that you lost is the animal itself that's brought, because you follow the din of roiv. Im hilchu b'hem achar roiv. Ella, hilchu b'achar roiv. Im roiv zecharim oilois. So many people have the gear say im, that the roiv oilois are zecharim, whichever way you read it. Im roiv nekevois zivchei shlamim. You follow roiv and you bring the animal itself. Asks the Gemara if that is the way Rabbi Yochanan is learning pshat in the Mishnah. So I get it that oilois can only be male, but shlamim can be male also. Shlamim is not only female. The eina shlamim boim also min azchanim and akevois. So how do you know just because it's an akeva if you're bringing this animal? So indeed, Rabbi Yochanan says you're right that keitzar hu oisa moitzi on lechulin. However, Rabbi Yochanan, it's all in between the lines, tells Rabbi Yosha, you're right. The animal you're not going to bring. You have to redeem it. And whenever it could be oila or shlamim, you have to redeem it on 2 piles of money. But you have to first wait for the animal to get blemished. Not like you. Moitzia l'chulin means wait for it to get blemished and then redeem it. And the chayzer, v'oisa oisa daf chafamid beis, oilois meaning af oilois. So he ended up agreeing with Rabbi Ishaya Rabbah, but he adds you have to wait for the animal to get blemished. However,
right.
Yeah.
Quick question. Before we said that the nesachim that come along with one of these found animals is provided by the tzibor, right? Because otherwise people wouldn't try and find things. Here, you find one animal, you end up having to bring 2 korbanos.
As long as you don't have to bring the nesachim, you're good. You see the psychology of people.
I mean, it seems kind of crazy. I would pick up an animal if I had to go now get by 2 animals because I found one animal.
Well, I would say like this: if I want to bring a shlamim, and I would pay for it anyways. In other words, what I'm doing is that this animal is going out l'chulin. Correct. I'm out of pocketing 1 full animal, but the animal is a carbon. I think people are machshav a carbon. The nesachim is like, nesachim is like second. Maybe they were not machshav it enough.
You find the random animal, and now suddenly you're on the hook to bring 2 korbanos.
No. The guy, the one who would take the animal, or someone who was planning to bring a carbon, anyways. And if the one who found it will always have to bring the own nesachim, then no one would take it. Okay, weiter. Amar Abzidi, a third explanation. Again, that the animal that you find is brought as an oiler. Why? Just like we said in the earlier Mishnah, that there's a concept of Tanai Bezin who alamisarais. That the surplus is brought as oilois. Kain at mar ufhachi azoizak mon oicheda. That it's a Tanai Bezin who aloha avudais. That even if the owner lachatchila designated it as a shlamim, it's a built-in pre-verbalized by Bezin, not by you. That if this animal is going to get lost, that this animal will become an oila. You're changing a designation. Are you allowed to do it? So he says, I'm not changing a designation. The Tanai Bezdin is that from when you brought the animal, when you bought it and you made it into a shlamim, lechatchila, it was a built-in Tanai that if this animal will get lost, retroactively it's an oila. So Pashit, a female animal, a oila is not a female animal. Roy female animals are shlamim. You bring this as a shlamim. Now, Danny, this answers your question. It works better with the nesachim. If the animal is a male animal, how do you know? Maybe it's a shlamim and a chanami. Tanai bezin, it becomes an oila. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yasa. Again, Anotaman, while I was still in Bavel. While I was still over there, Nebuch, before I came to the Holy Land, Shamat called Rav Yehuda. I heard that it was good. I heard that Rav Yehuda asking Shmuel, Nachamal, about learning this din. Number 1, Hifrish Kali Vomes. If a person designated the shekel is half a shekel, and the person passed away before giving it to the Beis Hamikdash, when you give it to the Beis Hamikdash, you're good. But before you gave it to the Beis Hamikdash, now it's ownerless. And again, what's really the question? Since the half a shekel is used for all karbanos tzibur, which also include chata'os, and the rule is that money that was designated for a chatas shemesu ba'aleh is taken into the kippah. It's left to die. If money was designated for a chatas, yiplu li amamelech. How does that affect the status of the shekel? So the rule was, that was part of the Tanai, that nevertheless, yiplu linadava. Next statement that he heard Rav Yehuda discussing and getting the halacha from his teacher, then from Shmuel. What about Moiser Asiris Ha'efa Shaloi? If there's a Kohen Gadol who separated money to buy his Chavite Kohen Gadol, and there's surplus money, there's extra, what do you do with it? And here again, the Torah one time refers to the Chavite Kohen Gadol as a chatos. Now, when it comes to a chatos, sometimes surplus chatos taka is used for an oila, but sometimes it has to be destroyed. So, and that was the machlekes. So Rabbi Yochanan says, Yelichem liyam hamelach. All of this is Shmuel telling Rabbi Yehuda, overheard by Rabbi Yasa. And Rabbi Lazar, the Baal Pluta of Rabbi Yochanan, says, no, that yiplul in a davam. Next din, now we're going on to another din that we didn't have until now. Asidis ha'efa shel kohen gadol. How is his daily asidis ha'efa chavite kohen gadol brought? We know the Torah writes that you divided it into two halves. Question is, did you sanctify it all together and then divide it into two halves, or was it first divided and only half sanctified at a time? Rabbi Yochanan says, first chutzah, first divide it before you were magdish it, before it wasn't viewed with kedusha saguf, and then each half of the isarin before it is brought was mekacha. And we'll learn so many details in Menachos. We speak about, there's a klei sharis that you put the mincha in, that is mekadosh it. When we speak about the kemitza, we say that the kemitza is put into a second klei sharis. The first klei sharis is mekadosh it, but they would only put in the first klei sharis half of it, and the other half did not have kedusha saguf until the afternoon. So holds Rabbi Yochanan. However, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar, no, that you are mekadosh all of it together, and only afterwards v'achar kach chutza. So that's the machlokes that they had, and now we're going to quote a Mishnah in Menachos that appears to be problematic on Rabbi Yochanan. Hold on, Masnisa, which is a Mishnah not here, the Mishnah Menachos seems pligi al Rabbi Yochanan has another opinion, seems to be implying that it first was fully sanctified. Why? So now we're quoting the Mishnah. The Mishnah there is speaking about a kohen gadol that passed away in the morning. Not like our Mishnah that spoke about a delay in the new appointment. And our Mishnah spoke about from whose pocket came the daily chavite kohen gadol. The Mishnah in Menachos is speaking about a scenario where they appointed a new kohen gadol on the same very day. Now, the kohen gadol, before he passed away, bought an entire isarin. It just happened to be that he brought half in the morning, and then the half in the afternoon he was not alive anymore. The new kohen gadol has to bring that day an entire isarin, but he also won't offer all of it because he only brings half when he brings it in the afternoon. So the Mishnah says indeed that the new kohen gadol only makriv half of his new chavite kohen gadol, and the other half is avet, gets destroyed. So you overnight it and then you burn it. Now, what is the issue? What is the issue? The issue is that you, Rabbi Yochanan, say that only chutzala, and then mekacha, which means the second half of the new kohen's gadol was never sanctified. Why would it have to get avet? Meil, according to Resh Lakish, it all became holy. And since you can only bring half, so then the other half is going to be, is going to get destroyed. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, why do you have to destroy it? So the Gemara answers, it's Rabbi Yochanan l'shitasei. What did we learn before? That if there's a surplus from the money of the kohen gadol, Rabbi Yochanan, not Rabbi Lezer. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it goes to Yam HaMelech. In other words, it's going to get destroyed not because it was imbued with kedusha saguf, because it's like surplus. Answers the Gemara. Pasalo, he answered, Shekin afilu mois yechol Yam HaMelech. Gevaldik. The Gemara continues. Now, Masnisa pligi el Hashem and Lakish. Now there is a braisa that elaborates the seifa of that Mishnah Menachos that now will seem to contradict Resh Lakish. Why is that? Because the Mishnah Menachos continues, making a point that Nimtzut comes out that Shnei Chatzoim Kerevim v'Shnei Chatzoim Avudim. In other words, like we mentioned, the kohen gadol that passed away, he passed away after he brought his half mourning. His second half is destroyed. The new kohen gadol also only brings half, even though he has to designate an entire risaron. So the Mishnah makes as a sikum that it's not only that the half of the new kohen gadol gets destroyed, there are two halves that are destroyed. That is the Mishnah. That's not a problem yet. However, the Tani Allah Braisa elaborates on that Mishnah and says that Mechza Rishon or Mechza Sheni, To ubar tsurasan, you can't right away burn them with psuli hamikdashim, but you have to wait for them to be overnighted, for them to have a change in appearance, and only then v'yetzu lebeis hasreifa. The question is, according to Reish Lakish, why will it need ibur tsura? Something that has kedushas haguf, my friends, but it is unredeemable. Something that's unredeemable, it's called a psul begufay. Something that has a psul begufay does not need to have ibur tsura. Since there is no kedusha in it, which means theoretically you could redeem it, Elamar Rabbi Yechanan holds this din that surplus of chavitim have to go liyam hamelach. Fine, but since it doesn't have an inherent psul, so it makes sense that before you throw it to yam hamelach, overnight it, at least overnight it. But according to Reish Lakish, it has kedusha and it can never be redeemed. It should not even need to have ibur tsura. So the Gemara says indeed that parsalah Rabbi Yishmael, that Reish Lakish is going to say that beraisa, I don't hold of that. However, Rabbi Yishmael holds that when you bring the isarin into the Beis Hamikdash, you have to be mekadesh all of it right away. I who say mekatsha va'achar chutzala, I follow Rabbi Yishmael. That Braisa doesn't. That Braisa clearly held that it wasn't fully sanctified, because if it would have been sanctified, you would not have to overnight it. But I don't have a problem because I have Rabbi Yishmael upon whom to lean. Now let's go weiter. Says the Braisa that kisha koyin miskarev tchila lavoida, the first time a koyin does a service in the Beis Hamikdash, maybe asiris ha'efa sheloi. He has to bring out of his own pocket what we call the minchas chinuch, which is exactly the same that the kohen gadol brings every day. And first of all, he brings it out of his own pocket. And number two, this will be the first time that this kohen will do his own avodah. V'oivda biyadai. He brings it himself. He doesn't give it out to anyone else. Echad kohen gadol v'echad kohen hedyet. Sha'avdu. Actually, v'yosirus efer shalohem. However, what happens if the kohen hedyet did an avodah before bringing his minchas chinuch? Or if a kohen gadol did an avodah on any day before bringing his own chavite kohen gadol, what will be the status of that avodah? So here it depends on the girsa. Our version is that the Braisa says avidosam ksheira, and here the Gra, the Hagoy Sagra says no, avidosam psula. Weiter says the Gemara that Rav Mana boye meimar. Rav Mana wanted to say that if boy bayoim sheneskarev tchila avodah, if the same day that this kohen hedyet was offered was allowed to do the avodah, if they then appointed him to be the kohen gadol, that means he didn't go from being a kohen that did not do the avodah to doing the avodah to then being upgraded. Lechatchila, he was made into a kohen gadol. That boy b'yom this man Aliyah is kohen gadol. He can't bring only one. He has to bring two. He has to bring the normal minchas chinuch and the chavite kohen gadol. Maybe shtayim achas lechinuchay va'achas lechoivas hayoim. Now that we are speaking about this mincha, and the pasuk in Parshat Tzav says regarding this flour offering, it says like this: Al machavas bashemen peyasem. It is made. It's made on a machvas. It's made on a griddle. It's made on a frying pan with oil. Now I know that frying and baking are two different acts, but here they're going to be called the same baking. So the pasuk says that it's baked or fried on a girdle. Then it says mur beches, it's scalded. That means that they would throw burning hot water on it. Then it says tufine minchas pitim. Now tufine means baked. So the seder of the pasuk is first it's fried and cooked, scalded, and then it's going to be baked. Really, is that the order? That's subject to a machlokes. So when it says the words tufine baked, so says the Gemara that b'shas hava'a tufine, we only baked it during the daytime, during the time that you are allowed to actually offer it. Ve'ein b'shachris tufine. Shachris doesn't mean morning. Shachris means that they woke up in the Beis Hamikdash pre-dawn to do certain preliminary avodas. You are not allowed to begin preparing it at a time that you can't offer it. Frag the Gemara, Aiva Hataninon, what we learned in Masechtas Tamid, that He'emidu Oise Chavitin Lasois Chavitin, that the kohen that was designated to prepare the Chavitin was woken up pre-dawn to prepare it. So the Gemara clarifies, Amar Bar Ada, no, that wasn't to actually begin scalding it, that wasn't actually to begin preparing it, it was only Lasois Chamin Liravucha. One of the steps was they poured boiling hot water on the flour to scald it. The water was allowed to be warmed pre-dawn, for which they woke him up earlier than Alois HaShachar, but the scalding it itself, the frying it itself, the baking it itself was only done b'shas you are allowed to bring it. When was it done? Tufine. So here we have a machlekes amayroim. Rabbi Yasa says the name of Rabbi Chanina, first mitagna, first they would fry it, and then they would bake it. And this appears to be following the Seder of the Pasuk. However, Rav Acha b'shem Rab Chanina says, no, first they would bake it, and only then would they fry it. V'achakach metagno. Says the Gemara that this machlokes amayroim, right, is a machlokes tanoim. Now we're quoting a Brais. Tu fine taiches, the Tanakama te'afeno no'o, that when you bake it, it should already be partially cooked. Partially cooked means, like the Seder HaPasik, that it's al machvas bashem and teyoseno. Al machvas here also means partially cooked. Rebbe says no, that the words tu fine means te'ofeno no. You bake it while it's still beautiful. Once you start scalding and frying flour, it doesn't look pretty. Fakert, the word tu fine means that you first bake it while it's still attractive, and only then do you do the frying. Rab Doisa says that the words te'afena means riba. You should bake it twice. Fakert. You fry it before, then you bake it, and then you fry it again. So now the Gemara says, now that we quoted the Baraisa, now you see that the machlekes amayroim is the machlekes tanoim. That Asyan Ilain Palgavasa, Kihinen Palgavasa, Man the Omar, the Tana that says Teofeno No'a. According to that comes the Amoid, and it says that first Oifa and then Metagno, because it looks more attractive before it's fried at all. The Man the Omar in the Baraisa that touches the words Tufina as Teofeno No, you bake it while it's already partially cooked, which means it's partially fried and scalded. That will be based on that Tana, will be the Amoida, command the Omar, Mitagna, Vachakach Oifa. And now says the Gemara that Loi Soif Davar Shemeis, when we are saying that if a Kohen Gadol dies and they appoint a new Kohen Gadol, right, so the new Kohen Gadol has to bring an entire Isaroin, even though he only offers half because the morning half was brought by the prior Kohen Gadol. This is not only true if the first Kohen Gadol actually passed away, but if the first Kohen Gadol became invalidated and now you have to appoint a secondary Kohen Gadol, the same halacha applies. However, the Gemara has a doubt. How disqualified must the first Kohen Gadol be for us to say that his replacement has to bring a new entire Risadan and the original Kohen Gadol's other half cannot be brought on today? Is it only afilu nitma? Nitma is a temporary disqualification. Do we say that if the original Kohen Gadol is only Tameh, so you only have to have him replaced until he becomes tar, even then will the new Kohen Gadol have to bring out of the new Kohen Gadol's pocket an entire Risadan? We may not use the half of the first Kohen Gadol, or is it only, not afil, or is it only nitcha, mimum, or is it only if the Kohen Gadol is completely pushed aside from being a Kohen because he has a permanent blemish, then we say it's as if he passed away and the new Kohen Gadol cannot bring the second half of the original one. Which one is it? So the Gemara says that Tani, Rabbi Yehuda bar Pazi, from the city of Bar Deloya, that va'afilu nitcha mimum, that it's only ki'ilu. If he has a permanent blemish, so the original Kohen Gadol will never come back to do the avodah. There is where we say that the new replacement has to bring an entire Risadan. That even though today you have half from the first one, it may not be brought. But if the Kohen Gadol became Tameh, yes, he has a replacement only until when he becomes Tahar. So then the new Kohen Gadol, who's only temporarily a Kohen Gadol, he is allowed to use, and he should use the second half of the original Kohen Gadol's chavitim for that day. Says the Gemara, Minayin l'Kohen Gadol, shemeis v'lei minu, achar tachtav, which is the case of our Mishnah. that Shetehei Minchasei Kireve Mishal Yarshim. Who was the one that said that? That was the machlokes we had in the Mishnah. And that was the Shita of Rebbe Yehuda, doesn't come Mishal Tzibur. How do you know that from? Says the Gemara, Talmud Leimer, Pasuk and Parshas Tzav, Mibana Vyasa Oisa. Clearly, bring it from his heirs. Yachol Yevienu Lachatzim. The heirs should bring it mamish the way the fathers brought it, which is half in the morning, half in the afternoon. No. For that we say, Oisa, Kula Amarti Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that if there's no living Kohen Gadol, even though it's coming out of the state of the Kohen Gadol, then it's brought all together. Rab Shimon Oimer, Eina Ba Ela Mishal Tzibur. It doesn't come from the Yarshim, it comes from the community, as it says regarding the Chavite Kohen Gadol, that it is a Chak Oilam, it's a statute of Oilam, of eternity. And now we have a Gavaldika concept. Here it's expressing itself in our halacha, but this is expressed in many areas, that an individual dies. Ein Sibur Meis. And when the Torah speaks about mitzvahs connected to Oilam, it dafka means Sibur. In other words, Chak Oilam, Misha Habris Kurus Aloi. It's only to the entity with which there is a eternal covenant, and not with a Yachid. So we have a pasuk fakir that tells you, even though it says in the Chumash, Mi Bana Vyasa Oisa, so each one has to do something with the pasuk of the other, but in Yerushalmi's Mekatzer, he brings from this that it comes Mishal Tzibur, and when it says Kolol Takter, he also agrees with Rabbi Yehuda, but from another source, that Kolol Lahaktara. We have another few minutes, let's go weiter. Kohen Gadol Shemeis V'chuli. So now, Rabbi Ba, the son of Mamol, Bo'ai Machalfa Shitasi de Rab Shimon. He wanted to say that the Braisa that we quoted above, whether it comes Mishal Yarshim, whether it comes Mishal Tzibur, and Rabbi Yehuda was the one that says it comes from the heirs. Rab Shimon was the one that says it comes Mishal Tzibur. Says Rabbi Ba, no, that it has to be wrong. It's a corrupted Braisa. Why? Because it contradicts our Mishnah. And whenever there's a stira as to who said what, the Mishnah will always trump. The Mishnah is more authentic. So, because Taman Amar, Taman over there, meaning over here. Here it says in our Mishnah that it comes, that Rab Shimon is the one that it says Mishal Yarshim. Now, by the way, look in the Mishnah. I know the Mishnah speaks about Rab Shimon giving the 7 enactments, but Rab Shimon was the one that says it comes Mishal Tzibur. But halt kop, Rab Shimon is saying that this was a enactment that it comes Mishal Tzibur. What does that imply? That before they made the takana that it shall come Mishal Tzibur, it mashma, before that it came Mishal Yarshim. That's a problem, because then Rab Shimon is contradicting himself. I know it fits with Rabbi Yehuda, but it doesn't work, so we're going to have to switch it. Here in the Braisa, Rab Shimon is the one biblically it comes Mishal Tzibur, from the words Chak Oilam. So answers the Amar Rab Chia Barba. He didn't answer, but he says, "Oh, this is a good kasha." He says, I so agree with that. Yeah, I know the Mishnah says de facto Rab Shimon says it comes Mishal Tzibur, but that's Takanas Bezdin, which implies that prior to that Takana it came from Yarshim. So no, so therefore the Braisa has to be switched the opinions. Says the Gemara, Amar Asa Rab Yaakov Baracha. And he said in the name of Rabbi Bo, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, you don't understand Rab Shimon. When Rab Shimon said Mishal Tzibur, Rabbi Yehuda is the one that says Mishal Yarshim. It doesn't contradict our Mishnah at all. Because the Bar Torah hu shetehei ba min hatzibur. It should come from the tzibur. Rab Shimon and the Braisa that says it comes Mishal Tzibur, it does not mean that it comes from the collective tzibur fund. No, it means that you have to make a new collection just to buy the Chavit Mishal Tzibur. Mishal Tzibur, but a new collection. And therefore, Yisi Omer Yigbullah. It should be, a new fundraiser should be made from it. We're going to skip all the parentheses. And that's the way it used to be for a long time. Then Rab Shimon in our Mishnah adds that they made a new takanas based in hiskinu shetei ba mitrumas alishka, that it should come from the already collected trumas halishka, because he felt that people are not going to donate money only to replace the Chavite Kohen Gadol because they couldn't figure out how to appoint a new Kohen Gadol. They would find it unfair, or for whatever other reason, it would be a difficult fundraiser. But not that takana wasn't comes from the Trumas Halishka and not from the Yarshim. He never held that it came from the Yarshim, so therefore don't corrupt the Braisa, don't be machal of the Shitas. Midoi Raisa, Rab Shimon holds that it comes from a new collection. Rabbi Yehuda holds Midoi Raisa, it comes from the Yarshim. And then later Rab Shimon said that they made from the 7 takanas that it should come from the already collected Trumas Halishka Chevra to be continued.